Milo and Daisy were two stray cats who had lived on the fringes of a busy city for as long as they could remember. They weren't the typical street cats you'd see hanging around parks or alleyways, begging for food. No, they had a quiet way of life. They had learned to be invisible, staying out of the way of busy pedestrians and noisy cars. Their home was an old, abandoned warehouse at the edge of the city, a place where they felt safe, hidden from the world. Milo, the older of the two, had fur as dark as midnight and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the world. Daisy was a bit younger, with soft calico fur and a gentle temperament. They had found each other on the streets and had formed a bond, silent, yet unbreakable. They looked out for one another, always sticking together. The world outside their warehouse home was full of challenges, and they both knew that they had to keep their distance from humans. There had been too many painful experiences with people who either ignored them or chased them away. Milo and Daisy had learned to fend for themselves, hunting for scraps and keeping to the shadows when danger approached. One rainy evening, as they huddled together for warmth in their warehouse corner, the sound of footsteps caught their attention. The air was damp, and the streetlights flickered in the distance. A woman, drenched from the rain, appeared at the entrance of the warehouse. She seemed lost, her expression distant as she looked around, almost as though she was searching for something or someone. She didn't notice the two cats at first. She just stood there, looking out at the pouring rain, her face weary and tired from the weight of her own thoughts. But then, Daisy, curious and ever the brave one, stepped forward. Milo hesitated, but he followed her, sensing something was different about this woman. The woman caught sight of Daisy's bright eyes staring at her from the shadows. She didn't jump or flinch. Instead, she smiled softly, a quiet understanding in her gaze. "Hello there," she said in a voice so soft that it almost seemed to blend with the sound of the rain. Daisy took a cautious step forward, her head low, but her curiosity stronger than her fear. The woman, whose name was Clara, knelt down slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements. "I don't have anything to offer you, but I can keep you company," she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of loneliness that echoed through the empty warehouse. Clara stayed there for a while, sitting on the cold concrete floor, letting the rain fall around them. The silence between her and the two cats wasn't awkward. It felt natural, comforting. Milo and Daisy stayed close but kept their distance, unsure yet intrigued. After a while, Clara stood up and turned to leave, but before she did, she gave a final, soft word. "I'll be back tomorrow." The next day, and the days that followed, Clara returned, always bringing something with her, some food, a soft blanket, or just her presence. Milo and Daisy, who had never trusted anyone, started to approach her more often. There was something about Clara's quiet nature that made them feel safe, something about her gentle demeanor that made them trust her little by little. One evening, as the weather grew colder, Clara sat down in the warehouse again, and this time, she didn't say anything. She simply opened a small tin of tuna and placed it carefully on the ground. Milo, who had always been the more cautious of the two, sniffed at the food but didn't eat right away. Daisy, more trusting, began eating immediately, glancing up at Clara every so often. Clara smiled to herself, watching them, and in that moment, she felt a strange connection to these two silent, misunderstood creatures. They had both been through their own struggles, just like her. She, too, had once felt invisible in the world. But in this abandoned warehouse, sitting silently with two stray cats, Clara felt seen in a way she hadn't in a long time. From that day on, Clara continued to visit the cats, but something had changed. They no longer stayed in the shadows, waiting for her to leave. Milo and Daisy began to approach her more and more, sitting beside her, purring softly when she petted them. They had never been loud or demanding cats, but their trust in Clara spoke volumes. In their silence, they communicated everything they needed to. Clara knew that she couldn't take them in. Her apartment wasn't big enough, and she couldn't keep them full-time, but she made a promise to them. "I'll always come back. You can count on me," she whispered one evening as she watched them settle down beside her. For Milo and Daisy, the world had changed. They no longer had to fend for themselves on the harsh streets. They had found someone who saw them, not as stray cats, but as creatures who simply needed love, even if that love was shared quietly. And for Clara, in return, she had found a kind of peace in these two silent souls, an unspoken connection that was far more meaningful than words.